Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is, wherever you are in the world, who is tuned into this live talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for joining us today. I am very, very happy to be here and be the host with Luiz Villaça, who is here to lead a two-part series today and September 10th. Luiz will be talking to us about the spirit world. Hi, Luiz. I,
Hello, Marcia.
Hello. I'd like to just take a brief moment, maybe a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, Luiz. Let's give us those minutes to announce two very important U.S. Spiritist Federation programs. So number one, it is the Initiation into Spiritism virtual course. It is a class, a series of lectures free of charge, and it's really meant for those who want to learn or review the very basic foundational principles of Spiritism, which was first published by Allan Kardec in 1857. This is a self-paced class. It has 30 lessons and 8 interactive Q&A sessions, and lessons are released weekly on Sunday. So tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, there will be another lesson. If you are interested, or maybe you know someone who could benefit from this course, take a moment. You may visit the course page on the U.S. Spiritist Federation website, and you can not only access tomorrow and the future releases, but also all the past classes, and also opt to receive emails as reminders. The second announcement is the U.S. Spiritist Federation 25th anniversary. I am so happy. It will be celebrated at the 16th U.S. Spiritist Symposium, as you can see in the banner, in Houston, Texas, on November 5th of this year. The 16th U.S. Spiritist Symposium will have the theme, as you can see as well, Time for Renewal, Healing, and Regrowth. This symposium is held annually, and it is a full day, the entire Saturday. The event is an opportunity to bring us all, unite us all, anyone who's interested in Spiritism here in the U.S., in a series of presentations and roundtables with speakers from all over the United States. And during this past 2 years, during the pandemic, we had virtual presentations. This is the first time we come back, and the symposium will be held in person, and we'll offer great activities for children and youth. And those sessions will have a focus on emotional healing and really address the impact of the pandemic on our families and our social lives. Please note, registration is open at the U.S. Spiritist Federation website and the symposium website, spiritistsymposium.org. So join us on November 5th in Houston, Texas at Rice University. I guess I lied, Louise, because I have one last announcement. So, a third one. Before we move to the presentation, just wanted to let you know that you should see on the screen there's a QR code. If you enjoy this series of live talks and you enjoy the Initiation to Spiritism course, and you would like to read more about Spiritism, the U.S. Spiritist Federation has continuously been working on translating Spiritist books into English. So we appreciate you taking the time to scan the QR code on screen. And with that, you will directly help produce future publications and promote Spiritism to everyone. Now I'm back to you, Louise, and it is really, really good to be here, to have you with us today. And together, you me and everyone who's here in this live broadcast would like to give a enormous warm virtual hug and a warm welcome to you, because it is really nice to have a two-part series to talk about this topic, the spirit world, as we mentioned before. Luis will provide today this analysis, and I guess, Luis, it's a huge material, right? It's a really vast sources for this. So this is, of course, a focused approach to this analysis. And this has been published for many, many centuries, but we will get into this journey today and later on in September to talk about a little bit, what do we as incarnate spirits know about those disincarnate spirits of their world, our world, right? But I am sure you are as eager as I am to hear from Luis. And before he actually starts this presentation, I would like to formally introduce you to him on his bio for anyone who may not know him yet. So, who is Luis? Luis is a volunteer at Grupo Fraterno. It is a Spiritist center in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he works in two areas, right? First one, he does work with mediumistic meetings, but also he's responsible for teaching classes on Spiritism and its body of work. Professionally, Luis is an electronics engineer. He has graduated with a Master of Science from Carnegie-Mellon University, and he also has an MBA from Manchester University. Please take this opportunity today to pay attention, send your questions or your comments during this presentation via the chat window. We have reserved time to address your comments and questions once Luis concludes his presentation. Thank you so much, Luis. I appreciate you being here, and let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. And I think I have very interesting material for both of those who are new to Spiritism and also those who have been, studying the subject for years in this incarnated life. So here we go. The Spirit World, Part 1. There will be a Part 2 in 2 weeks. And I take the liberty to thank Tanya and Marcia for accommodating my, complicated schedule and allow this to happen. I had so much material I want to share with you. And, I wouldn't have enough time. I did want to prune it. And, well, they found a way. The expression Spirit World came from Kardec. Actually, the first book of the codification, in the introduction, chapter 6, he tells us in his simplified description of what Spiritism is, that the material beings comprise the visible corporeal world, and the immaterial beings comprise the invisible or spirit world, the world of spirits. In the original in French is monde spirit, monde des esprits, monde spirituel, and in English we'll use spirit world. All of us, when we will leave the body, when we will depart from this world, we will return to the spirit world from where we came when we incarnated. So, what is this world? The spirit world. It's everywhere. Discarnate or errant spirits, they do not occupy a fixed or circumscribed region. They are everywhere in a space besides us, all around us, watching and intermingling, difficult English word, with us all the time. By the way, I'll use this slide to explain the way I present material. Everything that is in italic is from the original work, whatever it is. So all that's in italic, it has been reproduced word by word from the Spirit's book. Whatever is not in italic is either my opinion or something that's not written as such. The underlining is for me. So it helps me to pin out the important ideas, because I'm not going to read every line of every slide. They are there for you to read. Everything is referenced in my presentation, so you can go back and double check if I wrote it correctly. And by the way, I'm using all over, in respect to the Spirit's book, the Kindle translation. There is a more recent Nicole Alves translation, but I do not have electronic access to it, so it's very difficult to retype everything. So I'm using the Kindle translation. It's a 2006, I believe, translation, and that's what you're going to see all over. Why do we want to know about the spirit world? Because we're going to go there. Definitely, all of us are going to go there. And as Leon Denis properly comments, one of the benefits of the Spiritism is that it let us know where we are going to. And by knowing and understanding, we will feel comforted, and maybe it will help us adapt in our next stage after this one. Most of us, including myself, do not remember anything from the spirit world. A very few of us do, a small number that have recollections either from emancipations of the soul experiences during sleep, during ecstasy, or they have memories of their errance periods. But most of us don't. What we know has come from them, from communications from errant spirits that arrived through mediums to us. And many of them have been psychographed in books that we can read and learn. And also by inspired works from incarnates. Many times without knowing, they are reproducing things that have been inspired to them. Those are the sources. And there is a vast material published over the centuries regarding this. This particular talk and its continuations in 2 weeks is an invitation for us all together to gain new insights, even those that are very, very fluent in Spiritism, about the spirit world. How? By reading and analyzing together a very small part of this material. And let's go about it. We'll start by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, and I will take the liberty of going back and forth in time from book to book so that we can have, an interesting experience. For those who know Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, let me share with you an account by Divaldo Franco regarding this. So, what Divaldo tell us? In 1950, in one of the trips that Divaldo made to Pedro Leopoldo, where Chico Xavier was, he got a psychographic message through Chico Xavier from Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. First one. He was very young, he was very touched, and time went by. 20 years later, in January 1970, the spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda appeared to him, saying that he was a worker in the Bahian Spiritist Union while incarnated, dedicated himself to study mediumship, disobsession. And when he arrived in the spirit world, he went to study in more depth the obsessional alienations and the corresponding disobsession techniques. This photo on the left is a photo of Manuel Filomeno de Miranda in his last incarnation here with us. What happened is, he was invited by Joana de Angelis, who I believe you are well aware is the mentor of Divaldo Franco, to bring his contribution. And he spent, according to Divaldo, almost 30 years carrying out studies while discarnated. He then appeared for the first time to Divaldo and told him that he would like to write books through him. In an insight on the process, Divaldo tells us that for 30 days, for more than a month, actually, he appeared daily to Divaldo, establishing a good exchange, psychic exchange between them, so that they could, write fluently. And from this after this came the first book, in the Nos Bastidores da Obsessão. I would translate that to the backgrounds of obsession. I believe that it has not been translated to English, but we are not going to use it. So we'll start with Planetary Transition. This is a book by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. And he begins. Actually, in chapter 1, I plucked out a few paragraphs for us to study and analyze. And he tells us, activity in Colônia Redenção decreased so that residents could return to their homes or go to specialized learning centers. So he is in a colônia. Colônia Redenção is a different colony from Nosso Lar that we are used to talk about, and André Luiz has shown so much about it. And also, in this colony, there are homes, they have residents, they have learning centers. Seems very similar to the world we live in. And he continues, nurturing celebration touched the colony with a gentle breeze perfumed by flowers. So there's a breeze, there are flowers, and they have smell. They bloom in a garden. Very, very similar to the world we live here. So we can expect, when we become errant spirits after we depart this incarnation, to find an environment, hopefully, very similar to the one we are here, with flowers, breeze, homes, learning center. The interesting thing here is that where he is, he can observe Mother Earth, where we incarnated are adorned with artificial light. Later in chapter 4, but while on the subject, he tells us, the dawn was splendid with a turquoise blue sky. So in Colônia Redenção, we have mornings, we have dawns with beautiful blue skies, similar to the one I saw here today. It was beautiful. And he continues, although we are subject to the same action of the laws that maintain the terrestrial globe, so he's telling us, the spiritual world where he is under the same laws that we here on earth experience, the same physical laws, but the sunlight that reaches him in the spiritual world is always at the same temperature. And he says it's because there are no physical obstacles to the continuous production of heat. An interesting explanation, probably something you had wondered, and now you have an answer to it. Later in chapter 2, he will receive a visitor in Colônia Redenção. And he tells us, we had received vague information about Orion. Orion here is not a star. Orion here is the name attributed to a visitor, an important visitor. that he tells us would come from the Pleiades. Just for fun, I have here a picture of the Orion, actually of the Taurus constellation, showing the Pleiades where it is. Why is this visitor coming? In order to present them with important information regarding a project involving en masse reincarnation. Were you aware that there were projects involving reincarnation en masse? Maybe we are recruited to do something like this in the future. Very, very interesting. That had been taking place in our beloved planet since the second half of the last century. So this has been happening for like 70 years and now is intensifying. He tells us later in the text that the materialization of the special guest Orion happened in a tube of light, thanks to the contribution of mediums in the spirit world who offered him the proper substance for event. What he's describing here is a materialization event promoted by mediums in the spirit world, possibly in an analogy with what happens here in our material world. Isn't that interesting? Were you aware of mediums in the spirit world? Fantastic. The thing is, when we read these books, sometimes we let go of important passages. And what I'm inviting you here is that reread those. Pay attention to the details. There's so much information in there. Part of my objective here is not only to do this together with you, but to encourage you to read, to study, to go after those books that maybe you have already read and read them again. This is the core of Spiritism. But back to the text. At this very moment, the visitor Orion tells us, brothers and sisters from our sphere, from his sphere, are introducing this same program to other spirit communities near Earth, to other colonies similar to Colônia Redenção, so that together we may form a single caravan of industrial servants. So Orion is part of an effort orchestrated by high-level benevolent spirits to promote a single caravan of errant spirits to do a coordinated task on Earth. Isn't that great? Maybe you will participate on something so important when we are there. Hopefully. Spirit groups prepared for disseminating this program, he tells, will leave from all those communities to share this knowledge with serious Spiritist institutions, incarnated institutions, calling their members, us, to divulge the guidelines for the new commitments. Fantastic! And the emissary returned to the tube of light and vanished. What we learned about this highly coordinated activities performed by different spiritual colonies in the spiritual world to make things happen in the environment of Earth. Fantastic. Back to chapter 1. Let's check other things that Manuel Filomeno de Miranda tells us. At a certain point, he says, soft music reached our ears. They were rehearsing Johann Sebastian Bach Mass in B minor, masterfully played in organ, accompanying our community's children's choir. So in Colônia Redenção, we have music, there are organs, they play Bach's compositions that we know. And there are children, and the children play in choir. Isn't that fantastic? This thing about children in spiritual world is something that we will explore later in this presentation. It's sort of a conflict of ideas on what happens when children discarnate and get to the spirit world as errant spirits. But this is for later today, so remain on focus. Later, he was about to say something to his friend Oscar, and you see that Oscar is not really his friend, he's just arrived at the colony. When I noticed that Oscar was weeping discreetly, and he said, in our perfect, spontaneous mental oneness, I could see him thinking in retrospect about when, as a child, living in the Austrian Alps, he had been in a wooden village chapel, listening to this same Mass in B minor, played in an old organ. The thing to notice here is that in a spontaneous mental connection, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda was able to perceive what Oscar was remembering. Not only that, his memory changed, and he saw him running through green meadows in an area marked by wooden houses, etc. And he could tell that Oscar was aware of his psychic perception of his memory. So we can expect, when we are errant spirits, to be able to access the thoughts of someone with whom we have affinity, and actually see in his or her memories. And he will perceive that he is sharing those thoughts, or let other seize in our memory. And also we will perceive that he is visualizing, experiencing them. Isn't that great? Come on. Were you aware of this? This is us after we discarnate. And Oscar began to tell a story, and I will have to share with you part of the story just so that you have context. So Oscar told him that he was born in a region of Tyrol. He was of Jewish descent, but he also participated in the Catholic Church because there were no synagogues there. The thing is, Austria was invaded, and his home was ransacked by SS soldiers. He was taken to Auschwitz. All his family was killed. He was spared for forced labor. After 2 years, he was sent to Sobibor, and the war finally ended, and he was freed. After this, he began to attend the synagogue, pursued an education, graduated in medicine in the University of Vienna, so he stayed in Austria. He discarnated at 50 years of age, and this is fairly interesting. He began living in a Jewish spirit community in the spirit world with his parents. So this is the first reference I found in Spiritist literature, naming a spiritual city that was not, Christian oriented. Thinking about it, it's obvious that there must be a fairly large number of spiritual cities aiming for good, and some would be tied to other religions. But this is our first citation that I found of a Jewish spirit community. So this is the second spiritual city that we comment here, will comment of others, besides nosso lar. A question entered here. I was reading it. I shouldn't. Anyway, I'm a curious guy. Then he goes on. From that spirit community, he was now summoned, recruited to the activity that he will do as brothers and sisters with other errant spirits. Some of them, like Manuel, from Colónia Redenção. And Manuel clarifies, we were to return to our beloved Mother Earth for special activities, in accordance with the program prepared by the benefactors of our community. So, this is a different program from the one Orion talked about. Actually, this book, and you should read it, it's very interesting, has two parts. The second part is that mission that Orion mentioned regarding mass reincarnation. And the first part of the book has to do with this mission that is coordinated by the benefactors of Redenção colony, and brings people from other colonies to do this joint work. What it is going to be? Wait for the next slides. Later in chapter 4 appears Brother Charles White. By the way, White is an Anglican, a doctor who used to practice conventional medicine in his last incarnation. He's going to be the leader of this work. And he tells those around him that are going to compose his team, I am here in your colony performing an internship. Wow, there are internships in spiritual colonies, for which I have brought several friends who used to wear the customs of different nationalities. Different nationalities. This is going to have consequences. Manuel, who is a spiritist, as we described, was a spiritist in his last incarnation in Brazil, in Bahia. He tells us, the other, younger and smiling, dressed in the manner characteristic of his people, stated that he was a Muslim and that he was known as Abdul Severin. Abdul is the first Muslim, actually is the only reference to a Muslim errant spirit that I have ever found in spirit literature. If you have found others, please share with us. The caravan was composed of members of several spiritual persuasions, and the point in common of it was understanding the love that prevails through the universe. So we have good people aimed towards doing good, from different religions, working together in a project to provide assistance. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that something you would like to do when you become an errant spirit, to be able to work with other spirits also aiming towards good, independently of their beliefs or religions? I find it fantastic. Yes, it's Planetary Transition. Here, it's in the bottom, okay? All my slides are referenced. And in chapter 4 also, there's a small thing. It's not as much to the point, but I found it great and I want to share with you. Later in the chapter, he talks to Father Marcos, who's also a member of this expedition. And Father Marcos, was formerly a Catholic priest in his last incarnation. And he asks, Manuel is very profuse with questions. I was surprised and asked Father Marcos how he could reconcile reincarnation with the Catholic dogmas. As you know, the Catholic Church do not accept the possibility of reincarnation. We discarnate and we don't come back, according to the Church. Father Marcus looked at Philomeno and said, "My dear Philomeno, you know that religions clothe the truth in superstitions, myths, and dogmas." And later on, when we return to the spirit world, those formulas disappear, and we can quickly assimilate the essence of the truth and the logic of the universal good. So he was very fast to position himself as able to, once discarnated, I grab the whole of the idea and I forget the myths and the dogmas that don't help us at all. Isn't that fantastic also? Later on, he mentions Yvonne Costa. Yvonne Costa was sort of a famous spiritist worker in Brazil in the beginning of the 1900s of the 20th century. And he's also there for this task. But before this, he mentions discarnate engineers and architects built an emergency outpost. So you engineers and architects out there, you incarnated one, there's a good perspective for you. You might be able, if you like this work, to continue to perform it in the spirit world. At 6 p.m., they boarded a special vehicle. So in Colônia Redenção, there are vehicles as well that would take them to Sumatra, Indonesia. So now you know what's their project that's described in the first part of the book. They are going to Sumatra, to the Indian Ocean. Actually, it's around 2004 when that huge tsunami happened, resulted in a lot of destructions, a lot of discarnations, and it has hit Indonesia in a very bad way. And that's where they go. Later on in chapter 8, Dr. White make a few comments, and I will share them with you just so that we can pick out other characteristics of the spirit world. If you want to know more about their mission, go and read the book. I want you to read. It's fantastic to read. Thank you, Ebert, Adriana, and everybody else. So Dr. White said, I have used mental waves without verbalization in words. He's explaining how he was able to talk to other people there. He said that those afflicted brothers to whom he interacted heard his thoughts in their own languages. Our group is composed of spirits of different countries. Our communication, he explains, is mental. The language of the universe is thought. The task of interpreting languages belong to the perispirit. This is interesting. He's saying that the perispirit is actually our coder-decoder of languages. This was not clear to me before. The mind in the perispirit captures and decodes the thought waves automatically and naturally. And he finalizes saying, during my discussions, I used formulations of the English language, which were heard in Indonesian, in Portuguese, in Tagalog, and also by our collaborators, depending on their country of origin. Isn't that great? We are talking about a multi-language team of spiritual workers who talk in their own languages and understand in their own languages what the others say through thought communication. and they use the same capability, I could say, to interact to the local spirits that also speak a different language. Ooh, wow. Final comments on this particular book, just to tie to my next slide. In an earlier chapter, Manuel is describing some of the things he was seeing. And he mentions that they saw several hideous spirits with wolf-like faces and forms. They had become victims of zoanthropy, the change of their perispirit, partially or totally into forms that resemble animals. Dr. White explained that those were wretched spirits whose lives on earth were awful. They constructed their current terrifying appearances as a result of the evil they practiced. They cyclically deformed their perispirits, which, after discarnation, took on their present form. I wonder if this was conscious or unconscious. It's not clear in the text, but it is interesting. It is not. But of course, you had heard of zoanthropy in the spirit world. Some of you, at least. Let's go back now to an account from before the codification. This gentleman in the portrait on the left is Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri was incarnated between 1265 and 1321, 13th and 14th century. And this is the only portrait of Dante that I have found, and I did some extensive research, that was actually, done while he was alive. This is part of a very large affresco, a painting in a wall of a church, the Cappella di Bargello in Florence. And Dante Alighieri is famous for his masterpiece, The Divine Comedy. Almost everybody has heard of The Divine Comedy. It is a very large work divided in hell, purgatory, and paradise. It is poetry composed of, they call three chants, three cantos. Of three parts divided in 100 cantos. 33, 33, 33 for hell, purgatory, and paradise, and one additional. Actually, while writing this was probably the first large written piece in Italian. So it said that it helped to constitute the Italian language. And he invited something that's called la Terzarima, the three-line rhyme scheme. So that you at once in your lives, you've heard part of it in Italian. La gente che non vien con noi o feste, dizio perché già Cesar trionfando, Regina contra sé chamar-se in tese. So there's a rhyme, a very complicated rhyme scheme between o feste and sintese, and this triunfando will rhyme with the next Terzarima. And this is sort of complicated, but it is interesting. And unfortunately, it is lost on most translations because translations focus on the content and not on the rhyme. But the question is, was this work his inspired vision of the spiritual world? Or was it just an allegory of the times he lived in, as many critics defend? That's the question. I didn't mention, but he had a platonic love for a girl named Beatrice, who he barely knew, and died suddenly at an early age, I believe 20 somethings, 2 years after marrying somebody else. And he was, a, a, a fixed figure in his life. And somewhere in the Divine Comedy, not somewhere, a number of times he meets Beatrice. One of those times she says, Beatrice am I, who do bid thee go. Has he met Beatrice during an emancipation of the soul phenomenon while he was sleeping? Who are we to know? But we can imagine and we can analyze. Divine Comedy has been translated a number of times into English. The most usual translation is this one by this gentleman, Longfellow. I think this was done in the 1800s. And the illustrations also are from the same epoch by Gustave Doré. And just so that you have read, something from the Divine Comedy, take a look here at your right. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. And it goes on and on for 14,000 verses, if my memory is correct. By the way, this is the death mask of Dante Alighieri. Is a mask that's made after the person discarnated. I believe it's made out of gesso, I forgot the word in English. And the interesting thing is most of the portraits that you have seen showing Dante Alighieri are not portraits of him. They're portraits of his death mask. During the Divine Comedy, just so that you have the context, there's Virgil, the spirit of Virgil, the famous writer of the early ages, that conducts him through hell and paradise and walks him through all that. So that's why you see two figures, and that's why you see two figures here. This is actually a famous illustration by Botticelli. It's said that he illustrated a manuscript. The manuscript has been lost, but we believe that all the illustrations have been recovered, but they are not in one place. They are in several places. If I understand well, they have been collected in one exposition just once in the last 100 years. Anyway, he pictures Dante besides Virgilio many times as he walks through one of the circles of hell. This is a comment by Volmer do Rego. It is about the seventh circle and the Canto 12. And this picture is about the 80th circle, but because it's a nice picture, I'm reproducing it here with a different comment. But the point being, in Canto 12, he says that it is guarded, the seventh circle is guarded by a Minotaur. You know, a Minotaur is someone with the head of a bull and the body of a man. And also there are centaurs there. Centaurs is just the opposite, the body of horses and the upper torso of man. We have heard about those things, haven't we? They are zoanthropy. They are partial transformations. You can see here a number of figures painted by Botticelli showing also human-like figures, but they have animal features. Was this an inspired work, reproducing things that he saw while emancipating from his body? It is an interesting thesis, isn't it? Sharing with you, this is the largest Botticelli illustration, and I'm sure you've seen it. It shows the map of hell. And if you have watched the movie Inferno, it appears there many times. So it is an interesting movie. Go check it out. But the Brazilian Spiritist Federation gives us an important reminder, an important Spiritist orientation. Hell is just a figure of language, according to Spiritism. The spirits are not, a priori, condemned to live forever in a circumscribed specific regions. All of us, no matter who we are, we have the condition to learn and evolve and to change our level. So nobody is doomed, no spirit is doomed to stay somewhere forever. This is important. Going to decodification, back to decodification in the Spirit's book. There are things there that many of you probably haven't noticed, even after frequent readings. So, in questions 86, 87, Kardec tells us that although the corporeal world and the spirit world are independent, they continually react upon each other. Spirits are everywhere. Some are constantly at our side and acting upon us without being aware of it. However, not all spirits can go everywhere. There are regions that are forbidden to those who are less advanced. This means that when we become errant spirits, we will probably have, at our level of knowledge, our movement limited. And also, we might, although it's probably not the best thing for us, stay around here, close to incarnated spirits for some reason. Back to our slides. Now, I go to Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell, as you know, is the fourth book of the codification. It has two parts, and the second part is very interesting. Chapter 1 has to do with perturbation, that period, that situation that will happen to all of us in a smaller or larger or larger intensity when we discarnate. And from the chapter 2 on, he shares with us accounts from errant spirits. I believe there are around or over 50 accounts, and I chose just a small number of those to share and analyze here with you. He divides those accounts in blocks, and the first block is to do with happy spirits. One of those is Countess Paula. What Kardec tells us about Countess Paula? She was a young and beautiful and rich lady. She was a complete model of all virtues. She died at 36, at the age 36, in 1851. This communication has happened 12 years after she passed away. It was an evocation performed by asked by a relative. And it was originally in German. So there is, a number of translations, so there might be some distortion there. Interestingly enough, Countess Paula does not speak of spiritual cities. But check out, if you cannot read between the lines, that what she is experiencing is life in a spiritual city. I wanted to use a different word, but city. Oops, I was too fast again. She begins. I am happy beyond anything you could imagine, despite my being still far from the highest plane. So she knows that she is not on the highest plane at this time. She has a wider perspective of how things happen. She is probably a fairly elevated spirit compared, to us average guys from Earth, guys and girls from Earth. And later on she says, here everything breathes of love, trust, sincerity. Everywhere there are loving hearts. Everywhere we see friends. Nowhere there is envy or jealousy. Clearly, she is somewhere with other errant spirits, and those errant spirits are similar to her. They are oriented towards trust, toward love. She continues, this is the world in which I dwell. And you, my friend, will undoubtedly arrive here by following the morally upright path. Don't think that our happiness is exempt from changing suddenly. Actually, the original in French is a little different, but it gives the same meaning. It's neither an unending concert, a perpetual festival, a contemplation of eternity. No, our life here is movement, activity. Although occupations cause no fatigue, and understand she means physical fatigue, they present an incessant variety of aspects and emotions. Each spirit has a mission to fulfill. So she is with a group where the spirits have missions. Wards to protect, friends to visit, process of nature to oversee, suffering souls to console. There is coming and going, not from one street to another, but from one world to another. We meet, depart, and then join one another again. We assemble and share what we have done. We congratulate each other, and we consult and mutually assist one another with difficult cases. So she's in a community, and they work together, they assemble. She doesn't describe such a structured project as we saw in Manuel Filomeno de Miranda's description, but she's describing joint work, maybe in the depth that she was allowed to disclose in the 1860s. Can you imagine how shocking it would be if someone described spiritual cities in the 1860s? Probably the guy would be a candidate for, a hospital, a psychological institution. At least they were not burned on fire as they were before the 1600s, right? So definitely better. Thank you for the close-up. Later on, she tells, an important mission has been entrusted to her, and she is making every effort to fulfill it in the best way possible. She did not arrive at her present position without a struggle. no merit how meritorious was her last incarnation, it would not have been enough. Over many lifetimes I passed through trials. Acho que seria I have passed through trials, but well, I cut and pasted here. So she has a recollection of her past lifetimes, a perception of the past, which I had voluntarily chosen. She was allowed to choose her trials in past lives. Definitely a more elevated spirit than the average of us, right? I had the pleasure of emerging victorious from those trials. But I had yet to undergo one more, that was the last incarnation, wealth and material well-being. Before attempting it, she says, she desired to feel strong enough, because there was danger. Many spirits are seduced and rush to choose wealth as a trial. But they found that they are too weak to confront those dangers, and they allow material seduction to triumph over them in their inexperience. So she not only has perception of her own past trials, but she has perception of the trials of many other spirits and the result of those trials. Ooh, wow. Will we have such a perfection, such an elevation, such a perception when we discarnate? I wonder. Myself, I doubt it. Oh well. In the next chapter, he talks about average spirits, and I pick it up Miss Elaine Michel. Elaine Michel was evoked just 3 days after her death, so her perturbation period was very short. She was a young woman, Kardec tells us, of 25 years of age when she passed away. She was wealthy and a bit frivolous, but she had a good heart. She was gentle, benevolent, and charitable. And she starts saying, and here's the transcription. You can read it in small lines. I don't know where I am. Such confusion engulfs me. You called me, she was evoked, and I have come. I don't understand why I am not at home. She doesn't understand her current state. Something we often see in our work in spiritual institutions, of our incarnated spirit institutions, when helping errant spirits, while they communicate through mediums and we orient them. I don't understand why I'm not at home. They are mourning my absence, but I'm still there. And I cannot get them to recognize me, to see me. She doesn't perceive that she's dead. My body no longer belongs to me. Yet I can feel my body cold and frozen. I want to live it, but I'm still attached. I always go back to it. I am two persons, but I always go back to it. Oh, when will I understand what's happening to me? And she finally say, I must go there again, my other self. What will become of me while I am away from it? Goodbye. This is so similar to experience that, spirit institutions all over the world, people there experience, every week. So similar. I wonder if it will happen to us. I hope not. Then we go to suffering spirits. And I chose Pascal Lavic. Pascal Lavic was a fisherman that perished on the sea on December 11 of 1862. His body was only found in August 1863, about 8 months after he discarnated. The medium knew nothing about Pascal Lavic, had not access to this particular information on the news, and Lavic appeared to the medium spontaneously. He was not evocated. I really am Pascal Lavic, and I need your prayers, he said. Actually, he came sort of 3 times, and I am consolidating this in just one report, one account. I have suffered so much. My body perished at sea, but my spirit has remained attached to my body, wandering for a long time upon the waves. Thanks to the prayers of those who I left behind on earth, I was able to get out of my state of confusion and uncertainty. They have searched for me for a long time, and finally they found my body. He is from Calais. Calais, if you can enlarge the slide here just for a moment. He is from Calais. Calais is here, and his body was found here, close to Le Havre. So he probably drowned somewhere here while fishing, and all over this route, he was following his body floating on the waves. I'm sure that was tough. My spirit separated from my body only after I realized my wrongs. And even then, it still did not completely disconnect. Let this disastrous end to an unhappy earthly life be a lesson for us. We must always ponder the future. And that's a teaching of Spiritism. We must behave here while incarnated, knowing that we have a future as errant spirits and we have other incarnations ahead of us. And our mind must keep focused, must be kept focused on that. And finally, I'm going to mention one suicide, an atheist, Mr. JBD. He was an educated man, but saturated with materialistic ideas. He did not believe in the existence of the soul or of God. He was evoked at the request of a relative 2 years after his death. And he said, I am suffering in being obliged to believe in everything I used to deny. My soul is like a furnace. It's being tormented horribly. In a previous existence, meaning in an incarnation before the last one, he was evil. So he had this notion of other incarnations. And my spirit was condemned to suffer the torments of uncertainty throughout this life in his last incarnation. And while suffering those torments, he gave up and killed himself. And he tells us, can you believe how much a spirit suffers? A spirit who, throughout its entire life, was persuaded that nothing existed beyond himself and that he was always right. And then to find himself suddenly confronted with the obvious truth, such a spirit feels annihilated, humiliated. Its condition is unbearable. I can find neither peace nor repose. Actually, this is a fairly light account of a suicidal spirit. This is the contents, the reproduction of the contents of Heaven and Hell. And you see the number of different accounts that you can find there. I invite you to reread this volume. You'll find, pearls everywhere. This was just a brief analysis of a few testimonies. Go and read. How long has it been since you have read this book of decodification? We cannot talk about the spirit world without mentioning André Luiz. André Luiz probably has given the most read descriptions of the spirit world, of the spiritual calling Nosso Lar, where he went about after he was rescued from an Umbralian zone. André Luiz was a doctor in his last incarnation, and he lived in Rio de Janeiro. After discarnating, after getting to Nosso Lar, he was allowed to report through Chico Xavier his experiences as an errant spirit. His name is not André Luiz. We don't know his actual name. Wishing to remain anonymous, when asked about his name, we responded by adopting the name of one of Chico Xavier's brothers. In his series, Life in the Spiritual World, he wrote 16 books. Actually, most of us know 13 books, and maybe 11 or 10 are very easy to read. Go and read them again. Chapter 1, thank you. He tells us, with my hair on end, I pray to terrible fear. Many times I shouted like a raving lunatic. The scene on the left is from the movie Nosso Lar. This movie is available with English subtitles, so go and check it out. I begged for mercy, but my cries fell only on silence, or were answered by lamenting voices still more moving than my own. He was somewhere. He was not alone. He was other spirits. And like Countess Paula, he was with spirits in a similar situation to his, but very different from Countess Paula. He continues, at other times, sinister roars of laughter, as someone unknown companion must be close by me, a prisoner of insanity. Diabolical forms, ghastly faces, bestial countenances. So he was seeing, forms that also looked like animals or were animalesque. Similar to a description we already saw, the scene was bathed in a lurid light, shrouded in a thick fog. But when I came to the end of my strength, tells him, I implored the Creator of all things to take pity on me. At that moment, a person came forward. It was a fatherly old man named Clarencio that told him, courage, my son, the Lord has not forsaken you. Clarencio is there to help him. So we can expect, if we end up in a difficult place, that other spirits will come to help us. It will depend a lot of us, of asking for this help, of being open to this help. But there is help there, and it's good to know. Who knows where we will end up? My time is getting near the end. They're going to start throwing things at me, but let me try to finish this at least. André Luiz continues in Nosso Lar. Now in chapter 7, he went to that particular, that's the fourth, the spiritual city that we mentioned. He was rescued to Nosso Lar. He went to a hospital. He improved. Eventually, he was able to, lean out of his window and gaze at vast horizons. Check the similarity to Manuel's accounts that we checked on in the beginning. And, they're written 50 years, 70 years later than this particular one. Nearly everything seemed to be an improved copy of Earth. The ground was carpeted with greenery. There were large trees, rich orchards, delightful gardens. A range of hills could be seen beyond the plain in which Nosso Lar was situated. And there were buildings, graceful buildings. The sight of the streets, there were streets, impressed him. Wide avenues filled with pure air. He was able to breathe. There was gravity, very similar to our Earth. He saw no sign of inactivity or idleness anywhere. And I will ask my fellow controller of the camera to just show my face for a moment. Thank you. I had more material for today, but I will use it in the second part, and it's so interesting. You will love it. I'm sure you will. I'm definitely sure I will present you to books that you haven't read yet. Whoops! Now I'm ready. So I will use this final minute to call you to be here on September 10th for part 2 of the Spirit World. I do hope that on this first part, we all have been able to gain new insights about the Spirit World. And I say all of us, while preparing for this presentation, I gained a number of new insights that I hadn't noticed in first readings. And that's the idea for us, to analyze things together and to learn more about this world where we will be sooner or later, but we'll definitely, all of us, except for all of those around us that are already there and that are also watching this presentation here in my house besides me, maybe at your side while we're watching. On part 2, we will discuss Andrew Jackson David's account. We will discuss On the Way to a World of Regeneration. We will also discuss Swenderborg Communications, a work by Brother Jacob, Last Incarnation, Frederico Figner, I'm Back. That's very interesting. We also discuss a book called Crianças no Além that's not available. Very few people know, not available in English, but so interesting. It's a message passed by a boy, a 12 years old boy, through Chico Xavier. And also another book that my memory fails to share with you. I hope you enjoyed this, and if there are questions, I believe we have a couple minutes to try to address them.
That's awesome. Let's go get ready to address any comments or questions. But I want to say thank you, Luiz. Thank you for bringing to us the description. Right, it's a very as they were narrated by several authors. And
did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Did you gain at least one new insight, something I hadn't noticed before?
Well, I think for me specifically, Luiz, it has inspired me to reread some of the books, like you said, right? Especially when we look at perhaps Nosso Lar by Andre Luiz, or Heaven and Hell that Kardec codified, or even the Planetary Transition. Just look at it and start to bring about some of the things. They're there. They've been there, but let's look how How is it, the spirit world? But anyways, let's see if we have questions. We are now open. We're really quite advanced in time. So let's see if we can get to as many questions as possible before we have to close. So Paula, hi Paula, thanks for your question. Paula asked, what spirit form or body do we take on or look like when we discarnate from our earthly life? It's a good
Well,
one. Yes.
a good one. And what we know uh, has to do with what they tell us. So I believe that the consensual opinion here in the incarnate plan is that we'll take the form, most of us, of the last incarnation that we had, and we recognize ourselves as a continuation of our last incarnation. Most of us will take first the form that has to do with the moment we were in life, when we discarnated, and later on we will assume the image that we feel more comfortable with. That's usually of an adult around 40. That's the usual. But there are exceptions. If we are very advanced, we can manipulate easily with our minds the form of our perispirit, so we can change forms as we please. Actually, I think I said something wrong here. It has to do with our moral advancement. It has to do with our technical ability. There are less advanced spirits that also have a very good technical ability to change the aspect of their perispirits. So, short answer, last incarnation, an age of that we feel more comfortable with.
That's awesome. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate the question. Let's see if we have another question. And Yasko, hi, Yasko. Yasko Rakava is saying hi.
Hi.
So let's see the question itself. Regarding serving as mediums in the spiritual world, Chico Xavier, during his emancipation state, served as medium, right? You mentioned that. Could the quality of Chico's donated fluids be more suited for particular situations or needs than those fluids from the discarnated mediums?
Actually, what is written in the book is that a medium, not, whoops, the image is shaking, not necessarily Chico Xavier, was responsible for materializing Orion. I don't know what is this. Maybe I checked my table. For materializing Orion. So the book, what Manuel tells us is that a medium, not Chico Xavier, but I don't know if it could be him, have had to be there to materialize Horizon. And no, I could not answer if the quality of Chico's fluids is more or less suited to any particular situation. Who am I to say? But in the particular situation that Manuel has reported, it's not clear who the medium in the errant world is, unless you have read the book and have grasped a meaning that I couldn't.
That's right. So if anyone has a question, put in the chat window for all of us to learn. So let's see if we have a final question before we close. So we have this one. These accounts of the spirit world are wonderful, I think it says. Can you explain how understanding the details of the spirit world help us prepare for a return to the dimension upon our death?
I believe in a number of ways, and it has all been so well summarized by Leon Denis when he tells us that when we know where we are going, we can prepare for it. So, by understanding what those spirits go through after discarnation and how their behavior on past incarnations, particularly on this last incarnation,
Mhm.
is responsible for what they are experiencing in this next stage of their, eternal life. Uh, uh, we can behave better. We can not do the things we shouldn't do and try to direct our behavior, our interests, our dedication, not only to what happens this in this short here in this short period of time, but also on this next period of time that we will have and where we will experience the consequences of what we are doing here in one way or another, for the better,
Absolutely.
for the worse. We have
Absolutely.
a few more minutes, don't we?
We do,
Or
but
no?
I need to close. I think we need to close now. And I want to say thank you for the comments in the bottom part. So I think those comments just echo my own really excitement for your presentation today. So thank you, thank you. I want to say to everyone who was able to watch our talk live, and also those who are following the Spiritist Talk series. We all are here to say thank you, Luis. But let's remember next Saturday, which is September 3rd, I believe, at 11 a.m. Eastern, Domis, Marcos de Clay, who will be discussing Decalogue of Good Cheer, which is based on the book Courage. As we're here about to end our live, I would like to remind everyone, as per the beginning of our presentation today, of the upcoming 16th US Spiritus Symposium, which is with the theme Time for Renewal, Healing, and Regrowth. It will be held in Houston, Texas on November 5th. And if you plan to be there, make sure you register all your family so we can all really spend some time together, spend a full day learning and coming together to understand this beauty of the knowledge that Spiritism contains, right? It would be a special, very special occasion because we will also celebrate our 25th anniversary of the United Spirits Federation. And this is, to me, just an amazing opportunity for all of us to do that. Also, please don't miss tomorrow, Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the next class for the Initiation to Spiritism course. And let us know if you have any questions because we're collecting them for the Q&A session. Luis, as we indeed have come to the closing of our time today and look forward to being with you for the 10th of September, can you please say a prayer to all of us?
Of course. Let us thank the spirit, the benefacting spirits. Let us thank our mentors for the possibility of being here together, physically distant, but together by telecommunications and technology, sharing ideas, learning. Let us thank, those wonderful mediums that so much contribute to us by dedicating time and patience to transmitting the thoughts of those errant spirits so that we can learn more and also help a number of them. Let us thank the spirits that share their ideas with us, that send their message psychographed by mediums. So thank you, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. Thank you, André Luiz. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Viana de Carvalho. And thank you, so many others that have dedicated their time while errant spirits to share their minds with us. Thank you all that have watched this presentation, both incarnate and discarnate. And be back here in 2 weeks to watch the second part with us. And let's ask our mentors to, allow us to remember what we learned and to actually act upon those ideas. Thank you.